Great to be with you. Good morning. I know this is a fun, feels like a family reunion a little bit. We got the round tables, got some decor. Thank you so much for making the effort to be here today. My name is Drew Taylor. I'm one of the pastors here at Willow Creek, and I love that we have many from our Willow Creek church family, and I love that there are people not from Willow Creek. If you don't have a home church, we meet here every Sunday in the other building. This was our initial worship center we call the chapel. We meet in a little bit larger space called the worship center next door at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. So if you don't have a home church, would love you to join us. I'm guessing most of you that aren't involved with Willow Creek are connected in some way with the Blackstons. And they really are a joy. I'll talk about them in just a minute. But just kind of in way of a couple of announcements and things. First and foremost, just thank you for attending this sort of initial seminar that Willow Creek Church is offering. We are really dedicated. We want to minister to people where they're at in their life. Whether it be through in a marriage relationship or raising children or how to care well for aging parents, finances. There's any number of needs and concerns and things that go on in the lives of individuals, and we want to help fill some of those gaps. So our hope is that we would kind of regularly, at least every 4 to 6 months, be able to offer something like this that's really kind of practical to life. And so be on the lookout. I have all your information, so we'll be sending out kind of the next time we do something like this. But today is the focus is marriage, and specifically cultivating connection through your story and understanding your spouse. We're going to have 2 sessions this morning, led by the Blackstons, with a short break in between. We have snacks and coffee and water back there, thanks to Giselle, Chico, and AJ. Can you give them a round of applause for their efforts? Thank you very, very much. Giselle additionally did the tables here. They look beautiful. At the end of session 2, which will be around 11:30, we will have lunch. We've got a team back there in a little bit going to be preparing lunch for us, and we'll have a buffet in the back. I'll give direction when it's time. The restrooms are through the double doors back there if you need to go to the restroom. And one thing I want to submit, and Ryan, do we have the slide? If you have a question that either something from the Blackstons kind of spurs your thoughts, or just you have a question in general about marriage or about the topic at hand, you can text. That's my cell phone. It will be anonymous. We will not say who the question came from. But if you want to just jot down that number, if you don't already have it, and you can shoot that over, and I'll kind of MC the Q&A time during lunch. Obviously, if you need to go home, I know several of you have young kids. If you need to go home, that's fine, but we'll have 2 sessions, and then the lunch hour will be a Q&A with the Blackstons. So I hope you're able to stay for all of that. Let's see, one additional announcement. We are recording this, and so we didn't announce that to the church because we wanted people to show up and not just, I'll check it later. But we are putting this on our YouTube channel. Just search Willow Creek PCA. So feel free to share it with a friend or rewatch and engage again later on. And that's another reason we'll have the questions anonymous, so it's not all over the internet what you may have asked. At this time, let me open with a word of prayer, and then we will invite the Blackstons up. Father God, I thank you for this morning, Lord. I thank you that you are a God who, as we see literally throughout the pages of Scripture, have called people to yourself and called us to be in community with one another. Lord, I thank you for marriage. Marriage is a joy. It is challenging, but it's a great adventure that we get to go through life together with another person. And Lord, as we talk and touch on the theme of story today, Lord, I know that there are those in this room and watching on video later that have had quite the story. Maybe there's even those in this room right now that they're kind of looking at this morning as sort of maybe a last-ditch effort or a almost last-ditch effort to save something that previously was beautiful. Lord, I just pray that you would work in each and every heart in this room. I pray that you would speak in and through Michael and Rachel. I thank you for their marriage. I thank you for their wisdom as licensed mental health counselors. Lord, I thank you for their experience in loving and caring for people and pointing them to the hope that we have in our true groom as the bride of Christ, as we look to Jesus, who is the fulfillment of all of our deepest longings and needs. So, Lord, I thank you for those who have served today. I thank you for those who have made this time happen. And we give you all the glory, honor, and praise this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, before I invite the Blackstons up, I do want to give one special shout out as well. In the back, our tech man, Ryan Carter. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Michael, I pulled up Redeemer Counseling website and was going to do this whole intro. Why don't you introduce you and your wife, all right? Let's give a nice round of applause to Michael and Rachel Blackston.
Well, good morning. It has been such a joy already to get to touch base with many of you. We are Rachel and Michael Blackston, and we've had this partnership with Willow Creek for almost 10 years now. And we are so thankful for Willow Creek Church. So thank you to Pastor Drew and Pastor Greg for inviting us here. And we love that we get to partner with a church that values counseling and sees the need of counseling. And Gay, one of our counselors, is here today, which is such a privilege. And just to have had a partnership with you for this long. And I also wanted to say that we have 3 daughters. One who's in 5th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade, and they all went through Willow Creek Preschool, and so we are so grateful for the preschool here. And actually, sometimes from the counseling office, I can hear the singing in chapel, and right after our last one left the preschool, I teared up a little bit. I was like, oh, I can hear the songs of chapel and these precious children, and we don't have a child over there anymore, so we're so thankful and for all these young families. So I wanted to start out by asking to see if I could figure out the couple in here that has been married the least and the couple that has been married the longest. So let's start with the least amount. If you think that you have been married the shortest amount of time, raise your hand and we'll check in. Ooh, right here. Okay, tell me, how long have you been married?
4 weeks.
4 weeks, woo! Okay.
Piper and Joey Ketchum.
Woohoo! Anybody been married less than 4 weeks in the room? Congratulations. And actually, a fun fact is that Piper used to babysit for us, and I just saw her here. So that was really sweet. Okay, now married the longest. If you think that you might be in the ranks for that, raise your hand. Oh my goodness, the Butlers. Okay, let's see. How long? Brett?
41 years.
41 years. Anyone been married longer than that? Okay, big round of applause for the Butlers. Woo! Brett and Gay. Wonderful.
Oh, well, we are so delighted to be here, and you guys made it to a Saturday morning. You're giving up your Saturday morning to be here with us, which is in of itself is a win. So you guys need to pat yourself on the back for your willingness to invest in your marriage. So the question I have is, why are you here? And Drew mentioned this a little bit earlier, that my hunch is in a room of this size that you all come from a wide range of a continuum of why you're here. Some of you have a really good marriage and just have a longing for more, just want to grow deeper into your relationship and grow and discover more of each other. Some of you, to the outside world, everything looks good and great. You come to church on Sunday and go to work and do the kid thing, but on the inside you feel like miles away from your spouse. Like there's a distance that's formed. Some of you have just maybe resigned to, we're just going to get through this for the kids. Like there's no intimacy here between the two of us, and we're just going to kind of raise our kids and hope that we don't do too much damage in the meantime. Or maybe you've committed to just kind of cease to fight for anything more. It's like, it is what it is. Like, he's not going to change. she's not going to change. And so it's just a resignation to this is what it is. You might relate to Kay and Arnold in the movie Hope Springs. Kay, which I'm going to show you a clip in a second, is played by Meryl Streep, and she's a devoted wife. And in the course of the movie, you learn that they're empty nesters, and so they've raised their kids, and the kids have left the house, and it's just Kay and Arnold. And they begin to realize that the passion in their marriage has long faded. This is the great example of this is for one recent anniversary, they gave each other 100 channels of DirecTV for an anniversary gift. And then one day at work, Kay's at work, and she brings this question to a coworker.
Think you can change your marriage?
Change your marriage? What do you mean? Like you mostly eat in on Fridays and then you eat out, or that you're at each other's throats and suddenly you're Cinderella and Prince Charming?
Yeah, the second one.
No. No, you married who you married, you are who you are. Why would that change?
Well, if you wanted it to.
No, I think for that to happen, it would have to be so bad that somebody was willing to risk everything just to shake things up, and then it may not come down your way. Change is hard. Marriages don't change. Hey, what are you making tonight? Are the kids still coming over?
Yeah, prime rib.
So maybe you're like Kay in this clip where you long for something more. You long to restore maybe the joy, the passion, the excitement, but you feel more like roommates. So whatever the reason you're here, we are so glad that you're here, because one of our biggest hopes is that you all will find each other in a deeper, more connected way.
So I wanted to talk about a picture of us. This is when we got married. The year was 2005. And when I look back at this picture, I see this innocence that we did not know fully what we were walking into. We felt so deeply excited. We felt deeply excited about the journey. We didn't at that point realize how much the stories of our past would play out in our marriage. We got married at, just kind of thinking back a little bit, we got married at St. Paul's Presbyterian Church, so not far from here. And it poured down rain that evening, but I don't even think that I remembered the fact that it rained, because I just remember that once we walked down the aisle, I let out this huge squeal. And people just commented on the squeal because apparently it was really, really loud. But I didn't even realize it. I mean, there was just this sense of just robust joy and privilege of being able to walk down the aisle with Michael.
And so I think one of the things that we first want to start with is we want you to recall that first season of getting to know your spouse, your partner. Maybe you guys were dating and you knew it was going to be the one. And kind of hold this question of like, what first attracted you to your partner? I know for me, there's a lot of different things. So the first time we actually met was at New Smyrna Beach. I was hanging out with some friends, and she had some friends, and we were all kind of meeting up at the beach, and I saw her, and so I was like, wow, she's beautiful. And so I was very captivated just by how beautiful her smile and her eyes were. And there was just such a curiosity, right, of wanting to get to know her more. And then as we began to interact, we actually learned that we lived in the same apartment complex. We were both about to go to RTS, and we lived at the Oviedo Grove apartment. And we were like, whoa, that's so crazy that we like live in the same apartment complex. And so we started to get to know each other, and just was super attracted to first her love for Jesus. Rachel would just tell stories about how Jesus had captivated her heart and how she wanted to live a life that gave her life away because of that love. And so it just felt like this like-minded sense of like, oh, I want to be with this woman.
And for me, I don't know, how many of you women had a list? Did anybody have a list that they wrote in a journal about a man? Yes. Okay. I had a list, and one of the first things that I had on that list is that I want a man that gets excited. And I also had I want a man that is really good with children. And one of the first interactions I had with him, we came to the beach. I remember, just this moment walking up to the beach, and we were kind of meeting up, and he's like, I'm so excited you guys are here. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. So I wondered. And then a couple days later, we were at church, and he was the teacher of the first and second grade Sunday school class. I was like, oh. And after church, there are all these kids that were wrapped around his legs, and I was like, oh, he's really good with kids too. Ding, ding, ding. But and then the final thing that we laugh about today is that we were both in counseling at the time, and for some reason it was just so sexy to me that he was in counseling. So we would have these conversations. I think one time was at the RTS softball game, and I was like, hey, I just came from counseling. I don't even know how to be here. I've just got so much going on. And anyways, so we would have these early conversations, and we would pray for the person on our left, at the small group. So it was a very, very, very joyous time.
So we want to ask you guys, I want y'all to take a minute just to kind of reflect either to yourself or even to each other. Just what first attracted you to your spouse? What was it that it's that season where you're like, oh, I really think this is the one I want to spend my life with? And do you all recall hopes you had for marriage? I know for Rachel and I, we because of our own faith and just even as we were working through our own story, and we knew at that time that we both wanted to be counselors. We hadn't started grad school yet. But we really had this vision of oh, that would be so cool to get to walk with other people in our stories. And then we also just had this equal sense of adventure. We wanted to see different places that we hadn't seen in the country. We haven't really actually left the country, but and so I remember I used to always go vacation at the beach every summer. My family would go to the beach, and so I'd never gone out west, and so we were just having these conversations of I want to have adventure.
Yes. So take some time to think about this for a moment, and then talk to your spouse about what were some of those first things that attracted you to one another, and what were some of your hopes.
That's right. You just want to listen.
That was when it became a big for her. anybody who they can, and they're going to go to the park and put it in. Let's get out there.
All right, take about one more minute, and then we'll. I mean, I could. Technically till 10:15. All right. It was fun to hear the chatter among you all. Does anyone want to share? Anybody have an urge to share something that they talked about? Oh, it's motorcycle. Whoa. Do you still have that?
Load the kids on the back of the motorcycle, right?
That's awesome. Oh, man. Well, we like to start there because we think wherever you are in your current state of marriage, there's a space there that was special and sacred. But we know, right, that it can't stay in the honeymoon phase. Unless you have the secret that we don't. We'd love to hear. That we often start off connected and close, companions, but there soon arises barriers that begin to create distance or conflict. It could be stress about money. It could be childhood wounding that's playing out and that you're not even aware of that it's playing out. It could be like a mental health issue around depression or anxiety. It could be conflict around the roles and the responsibilities in the house. It could be a blended family. If you have a blended family and have kids from different families coming together. It could be adultery or infidelity that has created betrayal or trust issues. That regardless, big or small, that we all there begins to be barriers that exist between the connection that once was innocent and sweet. There's this great quote by Dennis and Barbara Rainey that says this: "Your marriage moves towards a state of isolation. Unless you lovingly and energetically nurture your marriage, you will begin to drift away from your mate." And I feel like this is such an important quote because what it basically says is connection doesn't just happen, right? Actually, what happens if left naturally to ourselves is drifting. Our good friends who work at Family Life, Dave and Meg Robbins, use the illustration of, how like when you're in the ocean and you're maybe like body surfing or just playing in the ocean and like you're right in front of your hotel, but before long, like 15 or 20 minutes later, you realize, wow, like we're kind of far away from our hotel. We need to get back to the shore, walk to the hotel, and then get back into the water. Like the natural state of things is that we're going to drift unless we nurture our marriage. It just is what it is. And so that's why it's so important, just like you get your oil change, that you're here today. This is an attempt, this is an investment to say, I'm gonna invest, I'm gonna nurture our relationship.
And the title today talks about cultivating our stories and learning more about our stories. So I wanted to talk more about that when I mentioned that when Michael and I got married and, I saw that he was great with kids and that he was very enthusiastic, we didn't realize, though, the impact of our past on one another and the way we related in marriage. There's a great quote by Kevin Lehman who says, "You're not getting married to a person without a past. You're going to bed with a person who has been indelibly imprinted by his order of birth, her parents' style of child rearing, and his early childhood experiences. She may be naked when she comes to bed, but the last thing she is alone." And just this idea that we came with a story. And so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about this theme of story, and particularly in the realm of attachment. So this is little
Look
Rachel.
Look at this cute little baby up there.
And I want to tell you a little bit about her story. So when my dad, his father, walked out on him when he was a baby, and so he was raised by his grandmother because when his mom saw him, she was just a painful reminder of her husband that had left. And so she turned my dad over to her mother and said, raise him, and really never sent him a birthday card. So my dad had an actual abandonment. It was extremely painful. And so when he got married to my mom, and they were excited to have a family, he had a good, and again, this is a good godly longing that he wanted to give his child everything he never had, right? And so he absolutely tried to make our life as good as he possibly could. But what was playing out underneath the surface was a pressure. He would get very angry if we felt ungrateful. Well, why? Because, he was giving us so much more than what he had gotten. And so when I would, as a child, pout about the fact that I didn't get a second cookie, this anger would boil up inside of him. Like, you are given so much, and yet you lay on the floor, and are crying or tantruming about this. And so in the end, what developed was this deep need in me to perform, and slowly kind of my trust in men started to slowly degenerate a bit, that I wasn't sure that men were emotionally safe. And again, my dad had a good longing, right? It started with a good desire, but in the end, it turned into pressure. And then eventually, by the time that I was in high school, college, I didn't feel very close to my dad because I had experienced so much of his anger.
And this is me as a kid, and I was born in 1980. And I think it's important to kind of know what I was born into in my family system. So I was the youngest I have two brothers and an older sister. So I was the baby of the family. And shortly before I was born, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes. And at the time, from what I've heard from my parents, is it was really anxiety provoking for how is it going to be treated? Can it be treated? What was going to be the impact of that? So there was just a lot of nervous energy around that diagnosis. And then shortly after I was born, my mom went through postpartum depression. And so she just didn't have a lot to offer me. In fact, my aunt, years later, actually, when we were married and we were visiting her in San Francisco, it was really helpful to give some context, because I actually hadn't remembered this, the details of this, but she would say that I was a very clingy baby. I just would always want to be close to my mom, but because my mom she was overwhelmed, my dad wasn't super involved in terms of helping out with the house and different things. So my mom did all the cooking and the laundry, which was pretty typical back in that day. And so he just kind of went to work and was checked out. And so my mom, I just kind of always wanted to be close to her. But she, in her postpartum and in her depression, the word would be personal space. She was like, I need some personal space. And so there's this clingy little boy who had desire to be connected and to be close, but was kind of told, not now, not now, not now. And that just impacts. That has an impact on a boy or on a girl that you don't actually realize how that's going to impact. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And so I became a very compliant kid. So I kind of learned to shut down my emotion, shut down what I was feeling, and just kind of put on a good, happy face. And so I did that, and I did that really well. I, got the good grades and enjoyed playing sports, and kind of on the outside looked like I had it all together, but inside there was just a lot of brokenness and hurt.
So you have Michael, who was kind of shut down to his own needs and kind of performing. And then you had me, who was very anxious. I was very anxious to try to read my dad's emotions and kind of always be gauging the temperature in the family. And so, we will talk about what that was like when the two of us came together. But the idea is that our stories impact our style of relating is actually backed up by scientific research. Has anyone heard of the theory of attachment in here? Yeah, a couple of you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the theory of attachment. And the basic tenet of the theory of attachment is that we are biologically driven to attach to others in order to survive. That we literally are hardwired for a relationship. And as Christians, this fits, right? We know we are made for relationship. So some of the questions of the attachment system is the attachment figure nearby, accessible, and attentive? If the answer is yes, a child tends to feel loved and kind of can move into their world and play and be sociable. If the answer is no, then the child experiences distress and anxiety and begins toward either clinginess or searching, or eventually, if too long they're searching and they can't find their caregiver, then they tend to shut down and withdraw. So kind of questions of attachment are you there for me? Can I count on you? Do you really care about me? Am I worthy of your love and protection? And what do I have to do to get your attention and your affection? And we're going to actually show you now a video that kind of explains a bit about early attachment.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Yeah, it's always a tough video, right, to watch that 2 minutes where the mom is just kind of frozen and not responding to the baby's cues, right? I'm curious if anything stood out to you all in watching that? What was anything that you all noticed or felt as you watched it? Yeah. Yeah. We actually usually tell people this is a little bit intense, so I apologize that we didn't give that warning. Yeah, but it is like it's gripping. Anybody else have a response to it?
I have a story. Sorry, I'm a talker. So I'm a nurse, and I work in the emergency room. And there was a child who was brought in by the police. Was in the back seat, probably about a year and a half, 2 years old. The mother that was found passed out, drugs, needles in her arm. They brought the baby and the mother to us. The police took the baby to us until DC got the baby. So a lot of the nurses were trying to comfort the baby and talk. No response. Wasn't talking because of that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
It was really sad.
Yeah, it's so hard to see.
No communication skills had started at all.
Yeah. And so you might be asking, why are we talking about this? So there's, as Rachel was talking about attachment styles, there's 4 attachment styles that have developed in the research. And what we're going to look at, we're going to go over these 4 attachment styles and actually have you all do a quiz here in a few minutes. But what we have found is that our early attachment imprints that we experience, and it's usually not even things that we remember, it's nor just the kind of the way that your family system operated and things that happened in terms of your own emotional need, like that imprint begins to impact your adult relationships. And so that's kind of where we're going. And so the first one is secure attachment. And secure attachment is what you experience. It's not perfect parenting by any means. It's when there's a rupture, and there always will be a rupture in any relationship. When there's a rupture, that there's the ability to repair that rupture. And so secure attachment is when the baby got upset and then was able to return to a state of calm and peace and connection with the caregiver. And then the second one, and we're going to go into detail more around how this looks like in adult attachment in just a few minutes. The second is anxious attachment. And that's when the baby wanted to be comforted, but also wanted to punish the parent for leaving. And so there develops like a lack of trust. And you could kind of begin to see the baby getting anxious when the mom wasn't responding, right? Like she was beginning to get anxious. Now, if that continued to happen and there wasn't repair, her body, the baby's body would be in this perpetual state of like angst. And then what happens in an avoidant attachment style is you kind of cut off the need. And so you don't feel anxious anymore. You almost say, I don't need you. I just will learn to self-soothe. And so the avoidant child often won't appear distressed when the parent leaves because they've learned not to depend on the caregiver. And then the last one is ambivalent. And this is often, the ambivalent one is often when there's been like domestic violence in the home or a real profound abuse or neglect. When you don't really know how the caregiver is going to respond. It's inconsistent. It's unpredictable. So at one time they may be very warm and very cuddly with you. And then the next time they might be really angry and hostile or just ignore and have an indifference towards you. And so someone who's come from an ambivalent attachment style is going to be marked with a lot of inconsistency. You're not going to know what you're going to get.
I just wanted to take a moment for you parents in the room before we go on to just kind of calm your nerves a little bit, because I know for me as a parent going over this material, even though I was looking at my story, I'm thinking of the Taylors that have 4 children that are very young, that they're mining the attachment of, is that I want to tell you really quick, good enough parenting is so important, that Gottman and several of the researchers say that 30% to 40% attunement is good enough for your kids, and repair is really the key here. I remember when I was first parenting our first child, and being a counselor and then having a baby is very anxiety producing, and I remember for some reason the car seat would stick out to me, and then swimming lessons. We did like the survival swimming lessons, and I'm like, they're gonna think that they're crying out and I'm not coming, and but we have to get to the grocery store, and and then I realized, like, oh, repair, it's the coming back, that there is always gonna be a moment where you are cooking dinner, feeding another baby, like you cannot be all things. And in fact, you can even over-attune to a child, feeling like you need to attune to them constantly. So really what this is about is primarily trying to have, and it can be very quick. It didn't take that baby. It's good for me to remind myself that baby did not take long before the mom says, it's okay. And then the baby was kind of back. And so I just wanted to speak to that because I know that can stir some own anxiety about your children, and we're here to talk about your marriage. So
the question, what happens when these two come together? Chaos, right?
Right. So here we have this sweet little boy and this sweet little girl that they come together. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what is the basis for looking at attachment in marriage. There's these two researchers, Haven and Shaver, and they were the first researchers back in the 80s to explore the connection between early attachment and then what happens in couples therapy. And they found these connections. One, that the connection between a mother and a father and their early baby, like a primary caregiver, and a couple, is that both feel safe when the other is nearby and responsive. Both engage in close, intimate bodily contact. Both feel insecure when the other is inaccessible. I mean, there's times maybe that Michael's looking at his phone and I need him, that I look like the baby in that video, right? I'm like, I'm right here, Both share discoveries with one another. So, like the baby's like, look at that way. It's like we have that deep, innate desire to like, hey, like sometimes, it's like, okay, that experience that I just had doesn't feel as catalyzing until I get to share it with the person closest to me, right? And then both, this is great, both play with one another's facial features and have kind of a mutual fascination and preoccupation with one another. So there is this connection between this early attachment. And we know this particularly because there is a hormone called oxytocin. I'm sure the nurse in the room knows a lot about oxytocin, but this is the same hormone that is released with a breastfeeding mother, as it is during sexual intercourse at the point of arousal. And so we know that there's this connection. It's like the love hormone. There's this connection between early bonding and then what happens in the marital relationship.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to pass out this quiz, and I'll just go ahead. Can you help me? Oh, thank you. Cool, thank you. Don't overthink it.
Don't worry.
Just take a minute. There you go.
Yeah, we Becky knows. I think it's been all this one.
What happened?
Just take the other one out.
So you'll go through the categories and then you'll score them. And then we're going to go over the 4 categories in marriage. So even if you still have some questions about which one yours is, hopefully when we go over it, it can be clarifying. Take a few more minutes and then we'll get started. If you're not done, just you can keep going while we're talking if you're still needing some more time. But just take another minute or so. So if you're like me, you don't want to be pigeonholed in assessments, like in a category. And that's a good thing because we are all so uniquely made and no category can really contain us. And so our hope is maybe that there'll be a primary one that you identify, maybe a secondary one, and that certainly can be impacted based on kind of season of life, stressors or whatnot. But there typically is ideally like a primary one that you can identify. And if you're secure, that's wonderful. But think about, okay, when you're in your distressed state or you're not in a good state, where you tend to go if you primarily identify with secure. So we're going to talk about secure style in marriage to begin with. And here are some descriptors. When you have a secure attachment in marriage, you're able to take risks and be vulnerable with the other person. You're able to share kind of what's happening inside to the other person. You feel more freedom to ask for help You work towards compromise in a conflict, which, by the way, at the second talk, Rachel and I are going to actually have a conflict that we're going to work out with you all that we haven't worked out. It happened last Saturday, so hopefully you guys can help us do that. You're able to say, I'm sorry, when you've done something wrong. So you're able to take responsibility in a secure style of relating. There's a balance in secure relating of autonomy, meaning you have healthy independence away from your spouse, but you also have an interdependence. So it's not like overly independent, that y'all don't need each other, but it's also not enmeshed so that all you have is each other. There's this healthy balance of independence and autonomy. A good example of this for us was I guess 2 weekends ago, we were up in Boston. I was doing a race, and the race was on Monday. And on Sunday afternoon, and Rachel came with me. It's the first time she came with me up to Boston for this race, and so that was super exciting. And if it wasn't for the race on Sunday, I would want to explore the city. But I knew that I was about to run 26 miles on Monday, so I was not really wanting to do a lot of walking around the city. And so we kind of had to talk through, because your experience was I want to go see the city. I want to take in the sights. And so we had to kind of negotiate hey, is it okay if I stay back in the hotel for the afternoon, and then you can go and do that?
Which was a big deal, because historically, and a lot of people will ask, can my attachment style grow in marriage? And I would say yes, because I think early on I would have felt very anxious, this weekend's about Michael, I should be here with him, but he actually wanted to watch a video of the documentary of the Boston bombing because it was the 10-year anniversary in the hotel room, which would have been very not good for my heart. That's what he wanted to do. And so I was I want to go out and check out the restaurants and go shopping. And so we actually were able to do that, where I think that's grown in me, where historically I would have probably just stayed in the hotel room and felt I want Michael to know he's a priority, and kind of not done what I really wanted to do.
Yeah, so being able to kind of know what your need is and not necessarily always get your need met, but to be able to negotiate and speak to the need. And I love Jesus in this, because I feel he models this ability to be in relationship and also to be by himself. He was not afraid to ask for a glass of water. He was not afraid to go away. I need to go away and spend time with the Father. So there's a sense that Jesus was able to have this flexibility, kind of knowing kind of what he needed, that I think is such a great example for us. And so secure, I think I've mentioned everything, but you get the sense of what the secure attachment can look like.
The anxious style, this is where I kind of is my tendency. These individuals tend to sort of be able to monitor the moods of everyone around them, and they feel most soothed when that person is happy. So in marriage, that plays out that if you're okay, I'm okay. And I remember early on, even Michael would say, where do you want to go to dinner? And I would actually say, I think I would feel best if we go where you want to go. I actually felt my need was that he was happy. That was a big kind of part of that. They calm their anxiety by meeting the needs of others. They may feel anxious. And when their partner wants to spend time alone, again, they may feel a sense of rejection by that. They tend to minimize, ignore, or have difficulty expressing their own needs. And they may actually also feel anxious when they are alone, because they don't have someone to kind of tune into. This is actually a story that part of this style has come out in our sex life, in that it was very difficult for me to realize the importance of my own needs and kind of what I wanted, where I was very attuned to Michael early on. So that is something that has kind of grown to more of a secure area.
Avoidance. So if you're avoidant, you're probably not comfortable in this workshop right now. And that's okay, but you're here. I think this is a great quote of an avoidant like myself. I like people, but I'm not very comfortable when they get emotional. I like to keep it simple. It's so much easier when people just take care of themselves. And so I remember early on in our marriage, like the first couple of years, and Rachel would be asking, I would come home from work and she'd be like, how's your day? And my answer would just be, fine. Like I was tired, I was stressed, like I wasn't really interested in like connecting. And I realized like pretty early on, I'm like, that's not very attractive to her. She's not very attracted to me when I just say fine. And so like I kind of had to like do my work, so to speak, of like, what's happening? I wasn't used to having someone who was really like attuned to me or like wanted to get to know like what was happening inside of me. And so a lot of that is because my growing up, like it wasn't something that I experienced interpersonally. And so a person who tends to be more avoidant is fairly independent. They can kind of take care of themselves and kind of keep people, even if they're around people, kind of keep people at an emotional distance, like a safe place. Anger tends to be the easiest emotion since it's not super vulnerable and it kind of helps push people away. And so I remember, for Rachel and I, a great example of like my avoidant style kind of clashing with her anxious style was related to a medical situation with our youngest daughter. So Charlotte, she's 6 now, and she had open heart surgery when she was born because of a congenital heart defect. And so every year I have to take her in to kind of get her heart checked out to make sure, that she's okay. And it's always anxiety producing for Rachel and I. And so Rachel is just like, I don't want to take her, you take her. And so it's kind of me and Charlotte's thing that I get to take her because it's just like PTSD going back to the hospital where it happened. And so every time we've gone, everything's kind of checked out. Like everything looks good, see in a year. But 2 years ago, I went to the cardiologist, and they were like, the cardiologist, he was just like, something's not quite right. I want to put her on a Holter monitor for 24 hours. And I actually remembering in the room with the doctor, like, Rachel's going to freak out about this. And I go to this ultra calm, like, yeah, it's no big deal. Like, we're just going to do, like, the doctor just wants to do this, like. And so when I call her in the car, like, that's what I do. I'm just like, yeah, like, we're just going to get this Holter monitor put on her for 24 hours. Like, it's no big deal. Like, I'm just kind of going, and we'll use these terms. These terms will make sense in our second talk. Kind of hypo-aroused. Like, I kind of go down. And what do you think Rachel does at that moment? Yes. She, like, spikes up. And
anger, panic, everything, yeah.
And mad at me because I'm just like, she's
just gonna have to wear this Holter monitor.
Yeah, like, did you ask him this? No. Like, he seemed pretty calm about it. And so it just is an example, right, of like the way that I'm wanting to avoid. But the reality is, a couple of days into like, because we hadn't found out the results of the Holter monitor, but I found that like on my runs in the morning that I was like kind of freaking out internally. Like, I was thinking, oh, Charlotte is like, she loves sports. I'm like, because they were talking about maybe needing to put a pacemaker in or something. I was like, oh, like, she might not be able to do those things. So I began to like have this like picture of like her life and just wondering what it was going to be. But I noticed that I was like, I don't want to like give myself permission to feel that. Like, I was kind of like pushing that down. And so it was really like repentance for me to like come to her and be like, I actually think that I do feel some anxiety, but I just don't want to feel it. Like, I just want to avoid it. And it actually kind of helped with the repair.
When he actually shared his fear, I actually, ironically, felt so much more calm because I felt less alone, because I was the one that was like heightening, this is a big deal, I'm terrified. But as he's like, actually, I'm really scared too, we were much closer in it. So, yes, repentance from avoidance. So.
That's right. So the avoidant is scared of emotional intimacy. Their touch, like, they often don't want to ask for their needs or, to be comforted. So they're normally used to just kind of comforting themselves. Often the phrase is like, give me space, or I'm a rock, I'm an island, I'll take care of it. And so that kind of gives you the categories for what avoidant style might look like.
Last style that we're going to talk about is ambivalence. And the word ambivalence actually means wanting two contrasting things at the same time. And when you think about, when I hold ambivalent attachment style, I think of someone who has an intense desire for connection, but terrified of connection at the same time. So they vacillate between feeling very, very needy and desperate for connection and being very angry and pushing that away. And oftentimes someone that does have an ambivalent attachment has experienced early trauma. And in this style, this person has this deep desire to want to be wanted, but they're not sure how to express that. They also tend to have a deep fear of abandonment. With this style, they may have had a parent that was sometimes very connected to them, and then other times there was maybe anger or deep neglect, and so they experienced a lot of just their nervous system was always kind of going back and forth. They may give mixed signals in marriage, and even though I would consider anxious my primary, I do have definitely some ambivalent style sometimes, so this plays out in conflict sometimes. It's like, okay, like I'm like, get out of here, like, I don't want to talk to you. And the next thing I'm like, why are you leaving me? It's just like there is this deep feeling of like, I want you to know what I need, but I'm terrified of like how to communicate that. This person might be very sensitive to rejection, and they vacillate between wanting others close and wanting others far away.
All right, so those are the 4 styles. I'm just curious if any couple would be willing to share this is what we tend to go to in our style of relating. Would anybody be willing to? Drew? I don't know if Becky is signed up for that, but...
She did, but she whispered, I don't care.
Okay. Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
On the quiz, I am a people pleaser. I said on the quiz, I'm definitely a people pleaser, so the anxious form of relating with secure being kind of second.
Yeah.
I'm definitely avoidant, like 110%.
This is good. This helps. So could you guys give us a little, how that might play out?
For me, when you said, doesn't ask for help, I hate asking for help because I feel like it makes me look weak and I can't do it. And so, one Sunday he was leaving for church, and Sunday mornings are crazy at our house, getting the kids dressed and out the door. And so I was super, it was Easter, I was super stressed, and I was feeding the twins, and he's like, I forget how he said it, but he's like, how can I make this easier? And I was like, just go to church, just leave, that will make it easier. But really inside I'm like, no, I need help, but I just could not come to say it.
Yeah. So. Oh, thank you guys. That's a great.
That means so much.
Anybody else want to? Were you going to say, Rachel, something?
I was just going to say that anxious and avoidant is a very, very common pattern. That's what we are. But I meet tons of couples in the counseling room where you have one avoidant and one anxious. So.
But it's not. There's other combinations too, for sure. Anybody else want to share? Thank you guys for your vulnerability.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
So we both had lots insecure, but when we're looking at our tendencies, I'm definitely more anxious and he's definitely more avoidant. And just we were at small group the other night and he was feeling touched out with our kids. And so he just shuts down. And then the anxious side of me is what what's wrong? Are you mad? Like, what can I do to help? And he's like,
Yes.
nothing, I'm fine. And that makes me like even more anxious until he just says, okay, I'm feeling touched out. And then I'm like, oh, okay, we're good. Like, I understand what's going on.
It kind of
And so-
relieves, like your body just relaxes
Yes,
when you're
and
like,
so
oh,
like it just makes me like this. And then once he's like, I just need it to be quiet. Like, I'm touched out. I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that.
oh, thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you guys for sharing. That's great. So real quickly, and then we're going to take a break. We just wanted to give you kind of 3 ways, like how do we cultivate secure attachment in marriage? And first of all, there's not like a follow these 3 steps and you're good. This is a process, right? This is, Rachel and I have been married 18 years. I'm sure Gay and Brett could tell you in their 41 years of marriage that it's a process that you're working, the dance, right, of like growing, and it requires a lot of grace and a lot of compassion. But these are a couple that came to mind. Becoming a safe space for your spouse. And one of the biggest ways I think that you can become a safe space for your spouse is actually getting to know like yourself. Like even this last example, like when you got to communicate what was bothering you with the kids, is like she was able to actually literally in her body feel safer. Like her anxiety wasn't as triggered. And so like getting to know your style of relating and how that might be impacting your intimacy is like a huge step. So like being here is like a huge step for like, but just being here and checking this off the list, off the box is not actually gonna probably do much, but it's cultivating a sense of awareness about what's happening in you. And I just want to say 2 ways that you to not create safety. Two things that we often do in marriage that don't create safety. I think it's important to name this. And John and Julie Gottman are like the marriage gurus, experts, and they come up with several different like things that happen in marriage that kind of create disconnection. 2 of them I want to talk about today. One is like when we're critical. Like criticism over time erodes intimacy. So that doesn't create safety. And so like when I can be, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, so like the need to be perfect. So when things aren't perfect, I can be critical. And if I keep doing that time after time, it's going to erode a sense of like safety. And so one of the ways that we've learned to like kind of the antidote, so to speak, of criticism is like being able to ask for what you need in like kind of a gentle startup. So like, I think I remember like, well, this can often be the case of like the trash getting taken out, right? And sometimes you can be critical towards me. Let's talk about this.
Yes. I can be like, can you take out the trash? Or have you noticed the trash is overflowing? And then one day I decided, it's probably after Gay came in and talked about the Gottman training in our staff meeting, I was like, hey babe, I noticed that the trash is ready. I would feel so much more, did I say something about how I would feel if he took the trash out? Because like the trash just makes me feel like if my trash is overflowing in the kitchen, it just makes me feel anxious about the whole kitchen. And you're like, oh my goodness, I'd love to. So I tried a gentle startup on the trash.
So like a gentle startup, like, hey, this is what I'm feeling versus like, you're doing this, like can often be this antidote to criticism. The other one is defensiveness. This defensiveness. Now this happened the other day for us as well. We were at Jeremiah's with some friends after a school event, and I kind of like, when I'm in a social situation, and there's kids running around, like I can just kind of zero in on who I'm talking to. Like, so I was talking to my friend Brian, like at Jeremiah's, and like it's the one up here, and so the kids were apparently we're going back and forth.
Crossing over the drive-through line. Yeah.
And I'm just like clueless to it because I'm just kind of like zeroed in. And so Rachel like brought this to me, and I was like, they were fine. Like I was just initially this like defensive, or like I was having a good conversation with Brian, or like, and so it doesn't go well. And so the antidote to defensiveness is, does anybody know besides Gay? The antidote to defensiveness is taking responsibility. So even if it's a small piece, it doesn't mean you take 100% if it's not 100% yours. But it's me saying, you know what, sweetie, you're right. I was like focused in on this conversation, and as a result of that, like it wasn't my intent, but as a result of that, like I left you really alone, like having to wrangle the kids.
Okay, I know you all are probably getting ready for a break, so we're going to move through these last 2 points really quickly, but be curious about your spouse's story. Some of just who we've learned so much about attachment and marriage from is Kay and Milan Yurkovich, who wrote the book How We Love. And Milan says, get a PhD in how your spouse was wounded. And that always sticks in my mind, that to study and hear the stories, to be curious about the stories that formed your spouse is so critical. And this has been so helpful for me sometimes when we have a moment together to even imagine Michael as a little boy that was really lonely in the summertime because both of his parents were working and he was shut down to his needs. You know, that's actually a helpful category for me when we're having some kind of difficult situation that we're walking through in our marriage. So I think that's a really, really important piece.
And this one is huge. Cultivate time together. I would love today to look at your calendars, and even if it's like 25 minutes for this week, like look for a time that you all can be face to face without technology, without a sense of we need to talk about, you know, the schedule for the week or what needs to be done, but it's more of a question of how are you doing? Like, or what we like to say, where are you? It's the question that God, right, asked Adam and Eve. The first question in the garden is like, where are you? And I love that question. It's just like, where are you? Where are you today? Like sometimes we'll introduce ourselves because we've been so busy and then we haven't had much time, and it's like, you're here. But cultivating that time together. I love, Paul Miller wrote the book A Praying Life, which is an amazing book on prayer if you haven't read it. But there's this quote that I think applies both in our relationship with God, but even in our intimate relationship. He says this: any relationship with God or with each other or friendship, if it's going to grow, needs private space, time together without an agenda, where you can get to know each other. You don't create intimacy, you make room for it. This is true whether you're talking about your spouse, your friend, or God. You need space to be together. And this is a convicting one for me. Efficiency, multitasking, and busyness all kill intimacy. I mean, you guys know this. We live in a world that's violently busy, right? And it gets more and more. And it's like, if we get to this season, then it won't be as busy. Well, somehow it gets busy there too. But creating time together is going to be a great way to create the secure attachment. Okay.
We wanted to end with this clip from the movie Shall We Dance about why people get married.
If it loads. Thank you to Ryan. We have a backup if this doesn't work.
Or should I just quote it and let's skip the clip?
Let's just see. He's got it.
All these promises that we make and we break, why is it, do you think, that people get married?
Passion.
No.
It's interesting, because I would have taken you for a romantic. Why then?
Because we need a witness to our lives. There's 1 billion people on the planet. I mean, what does any one life really mean? But in a marriage, you're promising to care about everything. The good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things. All of it, all the time, every day. You're saying your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. You can quote me on that if you like.
sure I will.
Anyway, the reason that I called you here today.
I just wanted to end with that because just in this idea of attachment, we know you all are made with a deep desire to be known and that your stories matter and that part of the beauty of marriage is someone witnessing, bearing witness to the stories of your life in a very intimate way. So I'm going to take a break.